Everybody, welcome to Disclosure Network New York. This is our Zoom meeting for our second meeting in November. And I'd like to welcome all of you here. Disclosure Network New York has been going now for 20 years in Manhattan. And the last 2 years, we've been doing Zoom meetings because of the COVID, whatever that is. So our venue has closed for the time being. And we're doing a Zoom meeting now for all of our members, and that is the first and the third Wednesday of every month. And we're going to be continuing to do that for the new year. Even if the venue opens up, we're still going to do one Zoom meeting in 2022. So it will be a Zoom meeting, and it will be a regular meeting face to face. At least that's the plan. That's the plan. Okay, so anyhow, here we are. We have a wonderful guest speaker today. I've had him on my podcast, and Robert White, welcome, sir. We love you, and welcome to this meeting. Thank you.
Hey, Nick, how's it going? I'm glad to be here. I know a lot of people have some questions, so a little bit about me to get the ball rolling here. So
Sure.
I'm a disclosure advocate. For me, it all started in 1991 when a UFO crashed behind my family's house. It was covered up by the men in black, the Air Force, the Coast Guards. For many years, there was no evidence of this. It was covered up well. My mother was on the Philadelphia KYW 3-channel news. Newspapers came out. The Mutual UFO Network came out as well, MUFON, and many other groups. And it was a big ordeal, a lot of different people. My mom was home with two of her girlfriends. I was upstairs. I was about 3.5 years old, a little older than that. My aunt next door, she was actually the one that saw it. So it happened April 21st, 1991, around 10:18 p.m. My aunt that lived directly next door to us, we lived here in southern New Jersey in a town called Lower Alois Creek. It's really close to the Delaware River, and we have a nuclear plant, the Salem County Nuclear Plant. The creek that comes off of the nuclear plant actually went directly behind our house. There was a little one-lane bridge, an old wood bridge, and one car at a time could go. And our house, there was a tree line, and our houses that were directly next to each other were on the other side of that tree line. So around 10:18 p.m., April 21st, my aunt was getting ready for bed, and she went to her bathroom. She looked out of her back window and noticed a elongated triangular craft, completely silent, with 3 blue lights and white light in the center of it, just hovering there, completely silent. It was raining that night due to the reports I uncovered later on. Cloud coverage was 1,200 foot. So this thing was low, maybe a telephone pole or two above the tree line. She's watching it. She says, "What could that be?" So she runs into her bedroom, calls my mother next door. She is watching a baseball game, Phillies baseball game, with two of her girlfriends. My mother goes to the back of the house in the kitchen to pick up the phone off the wall. Yes, it existed before cell phones. And she picked the phone off, and my aunt says, "Beth Ann, take a look out the back window. There's something above the tree line." My mother, she goes to the back window. She's still on the phone, the landline. And she goes, "Oh my God, what is that?" And my mom's two girlfriends heard the commotion of my mom saying, "Oh my God, what is that?" So they ran over, and they're all hooping and hollering. And I was little, I heard the commotion. So I started peeking too. But as they're watching this and commenting on it, it's completely silent. It's so low. It's so big. Well, what is it? Strange lights too. As they're watching it, red and orange sparks started shooting out of this thing, followed by a bright white flash of light. And this craft almost imploded into itself in the center and shot directly towards the ground, all in an instant. The outskirts of it looked very much like you would think a normal aircraft explosion would look like, meaning that trajectory of the debris was going 150 yards to 300 yards, like a normal explosion. But the core of it kind of, sucked itself in and snapped towards the ground. And whatever that bright white flash of light was, and I've talked about this before, I personally believe it was another sort of UFO that took this thing out. I have a feeling of who it is, and I don't think they were supposed to be there. And if that wasn't enough, so my family, they're watching this explosion happens. Everyone's like panicking. It was terrifying. My mother and aunt thought it was going to hit the house. They were concerned. It was such a close, to see something that large, even if it is a good distance from you, which it was pretty close, it seems a lot more than what it is, because, like you take a standard commercial airplane and you put it that low, they're ginormous, and this thing was actually a little smaller than that, I would probably say. And it was more of a size of a very, very, a little longer helicopter. Imagine a helicopter sideways. Imagine that, but maybe a little, maybe double that. And it had about that length. And because it was triangular, it had about that thickness. It was hard from the angle we were witnessing it at, but it was a pretty overall thin. It had curvature to it and strange angles. It was black. So my mom hung up the phone. She called 911. What happened after that is what really opened up the whole can of worms. Before this UFO crash, I lived in a very religious country area. No one in my family believed or talked about UFOs. It wasn't our thing. So my mother called 911. She was smart enough not to say it was a UFO. She says some sort of aircraft just exploded behind her house. Please send help. What else are you going to say? Regardless of what it is, something large and that can fly just crashed behind our house. 10 minutes later, police arrived to our house to get an initial statement. Then maybe 5-10 minutes. They were brief. They really wanted to get to the site to check it out. They went over to my aunt, got the same thing, and then made their way over. 25 minutes later, and keep in mind, throughout this whole entire event, my family did not leave our house. 25 minutes later, the men in black show up. They come inside, and that's a long story. I'm going to leave it vague. But they did some things, and they told my mother some things. And at this point in time was the first time my mom, relived and encountered her extraterrestrial experiences. And after doing this, she asked the men in black 3 really important questions, and they answered them. Then they threatened my mother to say it was a helicopter. They told her that the following day there would be UFO investigators, news reporters, tons of publicity contacting us, which was strange because my family remained anonymous. They, even in the MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network articles that I found 30 years after, we didn't have them. So I didn't find any hard evidence until 30 years after. But they came out, and the men in black were right. They knew people were going to come out, even though we didn't give our name out to anyone. So how is everyone, contacting us? It was strange. It's almost like they tipped all those other groups off and gave them the heads up to go out, almost to debunk it, almost like a new psyop of Blue Book, So anywho, they said, if you don't report it as a helicopter, we will take your son away. And I was about 3.5 years old, almost 4 years old. That's the threat they made to my 22-year-old single mother. Keep in mind, my aunt that was next door was 38 years old, single mother. And my cousin was about the same age, 1 month older than me. And so my mom said, I understood, the whole time, my mom and my family thought they were government officials, coming to find out more, but that wasn't the case. The first question they asked my mom and her 2 girlfriends is, can you draw 3 different types of extraterrestrials? They had a notepad and a pencil. They had the girls sat down, and that was the first thing they asked. So they already knew what was going on, and they were just going up And here's the crazy thing. We lived out in the middle of nowheres. That bridge was one of our shortcuts. And without it, it would take 25 minutes just to get to our family in the next town over. And the gentleman from the Air Force that was with them was from Dover Air Force Base, which is across the river. So this really tells me, that they were already aware of this or had this on radar because it was near the nuclear plant. Not to mention, we didn't really know what was going on at the scene because we were at our house. But 30 years later, after finding the articles and releasing it, other witnesses finally came forward. My family member, a cousin of mine, was the fire chief on there, And when the fire trucks got there, they were coming up and there was marshland on the left and they saw gouges all in the marshland. And as they got closer to where the bridge was, there was an armed Coast Guard gentleman standing there. They saw a Coast Guard cutter boat in the creek, and they saw black tarps laid out over the foxtails, the mud in the marsh. And they started slowing down, and they're in a fire truck, so they could see up above all the marsh and the foxtails. And the Coast Guard flagged them down. And he said the situation's under control, and he ordered them to turn back around. That's what they did. Went back to the firehouse. It was a local teen hangout place. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. It's where everyone would get their party on. A couple girls that were there at 2 different shifts went out and drove to check out because when the firefighters got back, they were like, that was really strange. They were chattering about it. You know how those country girls can be. They're bored. And in a small little town, something like this happens. Come on, if a neighbor paints their house a new color, they're going out to see what's going on. You know what I'm talking about. So it was a big deal. So they went out, and the first one, when they went there, they saw a tree cutting service. They were removing a few trees. And when the second one went out there, they saw a flatbed truck. And on the back of the flatbed truck, there was black tarped objects, a plain, non-military, a plain flatbed truck. These details are important. It's because they move things right in plain sight. When they move nuclear warheads across this country, they use absolutely normal vehicles and go through little small towns where you would think they would never go through. They move these things out in broad daylight, out in sight, although it was night. Long story short, they cleaned the whole area within 2 hours. Around 3.5 hours, and this is why my mom never left the house. 3.5 hours, 4 search and rescue helicopters finally made it to the scene from both New Jersey and Delaware, and one of them had a thermal camera. So they had 4 search and rescue helicopters from 2 states. Do you know what kind of taxpayer money that is? Like, something went down. You want to know something crazy? They didn't find nothing. And I have the reports from MUFON. All the bases were called, all the FFA, the local airports. No craft was reported missing. No craft was even supposed to be in that area because so close to the nuclear plant, it's a no-fly zone. So this is so strange. And keep in mind, the firefighters got there 40 minutes after the 911 call. The Coast Guard already had the scene tarped and had a guy on land and was already there. I personally believe Dover Air Force Base and the Coast Guard patrols the nuclear power plant, the waterways around that. I believe Dover had a hit on this because in my research 5 years prior, I also uncovered another article talking about the same thing with Dover Air Force Base, the Coast Guard, and the fire chief all talking to each other because there was reports of blue lights flying around near the nuclear plant 5 years prior before this crash. And this is all stuff I put together, accumulated. And,
well, Robert, I just want to interject here. Yeah. You're doing such a good job of painting the picture as it was. I just want to tell you that some people, kind of go kind of like berserk when something so unusual happens, and there's a lack of detailing. And your research and your memory and all that you've done to put this together, I just want to tell you how much we all appreciate all the work and the research that you've done to give us this very, very sharp, crystal clear picture of an amazing event happening to just a regular family minding their own business, and all of a sudden, wham, and the whole world changes. So I just wanted to interject that. Do you want to stop here and see if there's any questions? You just want whatever you want.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'll just say one little thing. So at a later time, Mutual UFO Network came out, a couple TV shows. And also the gentleman in the Air Force was trained in regression hypnosis therapy, and they did a small session. That's when my mom first relived her alien abductions. And that can be a whole nother segment, but my mother was a contactee. I'm sure people will have a lot of questions, and she was a part of a lot of different experiments and contact and things like that. But a lot more to the story, but let's open it up for some questions.
Okay, very good. If anybody has a question, raise your hand. And let's see. Well, I'll start off then, Robert. The explosion that happened that you carefully described, was there a lot of fire with that? You mentioned fire, firemen or something. Was there a lot of smoke, and was that going on also?
This is the really, really interesting part. Now, during the actual explosion, like my mom, my aunt, everyone reported, there was red and orange sparks shooting out of it, followed by that bright white flash, and then like the explosion. And during that explosion, especially around the perimeters, there was fire and flames as what you would imagine an explosion look like. Ironically, there were no burn marks in the area, and there was no fire, which I don't understand that. It was raining. It was raining the night of the incident. Okay. So I mean, but still, I've seen crash sites in bad weather of airplanes, and the ground is burning until the firefighters put it out. Jet fuel or any sort of fuel or nuclear fission in our high-tech craft, you know, when that stuff explodes, there's going to be fire and smoke. And there wasn't any. When the fire trucks were pulling up, they just saw gouges in the freshly made gouges, and they saw the black tarps there, but there was no smoke. I'm sure if they would have saw smoke, they're like, oh, no, you don't. We're putting this out. But there wasn't any. So when the Coast Guard said situation's under control, you can turn back around, they were like, well, they got black tarps there and there's gouges, but we don't see a fire, and we're firefighters. We don't see any bodies or any sort of vehicle. You know, most of it was under, black tarps. Plus, the way this craft kind of imploded on itself before shooting towards the ground, a part of me, I know there's debris there all around, but a part of me, I don't know if like the core of it just went into another density, another dimension.
Could be.
I don't know. But during that explosion, the outskirts, as I said, there was debris flying as you would find. It's just whatever that propulsion system this craft was using, when one of those go, it doesn't go the way ours go. It's not our kind of technology. And I have no idea. It was absolutely insane.
Right. Thank you for that. And I think that you've just covered that really well. And I can understand that new technology, and here we're talking about not fossil fuels here for sure. This is a technology that doesn't have anything like that. And so maybe there was nothing to burn necessarily. You know, the whole thing wasn't combustible because of metal, and different kinds of fuels might do that. We're going to go to Adrian first. Adrian, you had your hand up. Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I have multiple questions, but I'll start with one.
Just pick one. Let's pick one for now, and then we'll go through everybody, and then you can do a second.
That white light underneath the craft, you were able to see it because it was hovering, at that particular height. Could you describe the diameter of it? Was it the circumference of a trash can lid, or or something larger?
Much larger than a trash can lid. And the light that was coming off of it, there's no reference. I don't have any sort of light that I could describe it to. I've never seen a light source like that. It was almost like a brilliant, blinding, bluish, almost white bluish. I can't really describe it. And it was very large. It was slightly larger than the three blue lights that were on the triangle part of it, and they were kind of smaller in reference to the bright light coming from the center of it. But the bright light, it was almost like kind of facing towards our house. So it was really, really coming down. And when the light's coming towards you, it becomes more circular. So it seemed really, really big. And
Okay,
it was so, it was tough to tell.
Right.
So
Thank you for that. Adrian, I got to go. You're going to get one question per time because we want to get everybody who has one question, and then we'll go back for another one once you have more. We're going to go to Linda now. Linda, please go ahead. You got to unmute yourself. Make sure you unmute.
Right.
There you go. There you go.
Hi, Robert. Nice to have you.
Hello.
Yep, your story is, I was following it. I follow all the stories. I try to hang in there step by step. At the end, though, you said your mother was a contactee. Did she, was she abducted and didn't know it and then became alive in a craft, and then they made her, know why they wanted her? Do you know what I mean? It was like she was a contactee. So she didn't start out like that. She was abducted, and then somehow they used her or utilized her or convinced her or brainwashed her, or one of those, to become part of whatever it was that they wanted to transmute to humans back and forth, right?
Basically, the little backstory on my mother, up until this crash and those gentlemen doing this regression hypnosis on my mother, up until that point, other than my mother waking up with strange scars, other woman problems, she had a lot of women problems, constant bleeding, I'll get more into that. But strange dreams, my grandmother would just dismiss it. It's your imagination. If she woke up with scars on her, my grandmother would say, you must have scratched yourself. It was this. After my mother's regressions, it turns out that these beings were taking her since she was a baby. And she was introduced in the hybrid program once she was 9 years old. She had her menstrual cycle. That's when they took involvement. They started using her eggs and embryos. They would take them out, create some sort of new embryo, put it back in her, let her incubate, then take it out. At a later time, these beings grow really quick, a lot faster than us humans grow.
I know.
And she would go back at later times and have interactions with her hybrid children. Some were deformed, some look more alien, and some were that perfect mix of human and alien, gray extraterrestrial. For the most part, in these, they were the beings she called the tall whites, which I believe, especially due to the craft that crashed, I believe these belong to a species called the Kilitoquart, which come from the Vela star constellation. They're very tall, white, gray extraterrestrials. They have very light gray skin. And of course, there were, my mom called them the little Zetas. Everyone uses Zetas as their little helpers, coming from Zeta Reticuli. But through a lot of these contacts and experiences and abductions, my mom made it a point to say she was never afraid. But I think because she was having these things done to her, there were other fractions of extraterrestrials. For example, she called the Nordics or the Blues, and the Blues being the Arcturians, Nordics being Palladians, and all the other species. There's thousands of beings that look like that. But I think they kind of got involved because of what was going on. And this all goes back to the crash itself. I think this was, for example, the Galactic Federation of Worlds interfering with the Killy-Toe Court, the tall whites, who are known to be mercenaries, highly involved with sex and slave trade as well. That's one of their things. And it's not super common for them to be in hybrid programs. So the fact they were even doing it to my mother is like really confusing in itself. It's not like a Zeta Reticuli, but my mother had, a lot of these experiences, and with the positive beings trying to save her, the blues or the Nordics, she called them, they would just really give her positive, encouragement. And she just always really felt at peace. And even in some more of her traumatic experiences, these beings have a way of just calming you. And my mom was really brave. And even if they were weird looking, they had a way to just kind of numb you.
Robert,
Oh, I
thank
know
you for
that.
that. Linda, thank you for your question. We're going to move now to Rena. Rena, your hand's up. Please ask one question, please. Well, you just disappeared, Rena. You got to, there you go. There you go. Okay.
I was just unmuting myself, sorry. I was wondering if you know anything about the Aurora ships, because it sounds like the ship that you were talking about is very similar to the Aurora ships. They're a man-made ship, but they've also been seen with other aliens too. I think it's an alien technology that was given to us. But they have that big central light in the center, and then the 3 points of light in the triangle part. So I wondered if you knew anything about the auroras, and whether you think that might have been an aurora.
Absolutely. I know exactly what the Aurora or the TR-3B, goes by a lot of different names. And that craft, ironically, from 1988 to about 1992, was the highest reports of them flying those craft around. And yes, they are reverse engineered technology that they're using. They are using a different kind of propulsion. The only difference is exactly what you described. They have more rounded edges. They're more of a perfect triangle, like perfect, like man-made perfect triangle. They have the same lights, but they're normally not blue. They'll be red, sometimes green, things like this. And they'll have a red orangish light in the center of it. And that's the Aurora and the TR-3Bs. And it's running off a different system. The craft my family saw, it was elongated, think kind of like a helicopter. It wasn't a perfect triangle. It was more like a spade, It was something more like a spade and elongated.
I've seen those. I've seen those.
It was black, and although it was dark and it was black, because of the lights shining off of it, the texture of it, it seemed to have a lot of different little pieces to it. Not like one solid, flat piece of metal or something like that. It seemed like there was layers or engravings, or like it was made out of some sort of like black, like sharp metal, like crystallish material. I have no idea. But yes, I am familiar with the TR-3B, and around the time frame was the largest sightings of that. And for that was one thing I've always wondered, are they covering up something on their own end? Is this what that was? And that's why the government knew about it there. But with the way it looks, because I've spent a lot of time researching, because I thought it was a real possibility that a TR-3B could have crashed behind my house. But when I start really getting into it, there's just not enough there, and too many other weird coincidences, Great
Robert,
question.
thank you for that. Thank you for that. Rena, thank you for your question. We're going to move now. Carol, I know you just joined us recently. Do you have any question for Robert? I think you've known his story from an earlier time. At this
Not
moment,
at the moment. And I do remember, but not at the moment.
Okay, very good. We're going to move on now. Does Jim? You're muted now, but Jim, you have a little cartoon on your. Do you have a question for Robert? I have a feeling
No.
you do.
No questions, thanks.
At this, okay. And Mark, do you have a question for Robert at this moment? You're muted right now. No. Okay. All right, we're going to move.
Not right now. Thanks a lot.
Oh, hey, Mark. Well, we'd love to see your handsome face.
I wasn't ready for primetime playing.
All
Maybe in a little while. Maybe
All
in a
right,
little while.
Put your makeup on and come on back, please. Put your
Powder.
Oh man. All right. And Michael, I think I see you. Michael, do you have a question? Earth to Michael. Earth to Michael. Come in. Earth to Michael. No? Okay. All right. Let me see. Before we go around, I have one question, and then we'll go and we'll do another round. If you have another question, put your hand. Oh, I see two hands already. Robert, I know that the whole area of your mom and all that she went through for a long period of time is really another program. I totally get that. There's a lot there, a very important data for sure. I think that's one of the most important areas, really, is what went on after this horrendous explosion happened and your whole life changed. Your mom's life, your life, everybody's life changed at that time with that part of the little planet. Do you feel as though your mom would want to, if she were here, what would she say about her children? Because I believe that she did see some of those children. What would she say? Would she embrace them? Or just some idea about what you feel as though she might say or think?
Absolutely. When this happened, it was a lot for my mother. It was a lot for me too. I was having nightmares after the crash and stuff. They had to take away all my alien action figures. But my mother, one thing she would talk about in her regressions and in later years, once I was a kid, my mom would only tell me certain things. During the crash, I was told, extraterrestrials are real. Sometimes they take mommy, one of their cars crashed out back. It was explained to me the same way you would imagine explained to a kid. And because of Hollywood and stuff, I saw ET. I love Ninja Turtles. I'm like, all right, reptilians, Ninja Turtles, let's go. Like I didn't care, you know what I mean? So she told it to me, but what was actually happening to her, she was, going back, and she would wake up on the table. She would see her children standing off to the side. And like I said, some were deformed, some look, I hate to use this, but Sloth from the Goonies, they looked deformed like that. Others were a perfect mix of gray alien and humanoid, and others looked a little bit more gray alien than human, but they didn't have that perfect human yet. They were probably saving that one for a drop off. But long story short, one thing she would always, and this is all telepathic. The children did not interact with her. It was like a telepathic interaction, and she was communicating with them through telepathy. And the whole time, telepathically, she would be, asking them, telling them, can I please have one of my babies? Can I please have one? Can I please have one? I miss my babies. I miss my babies. And the tall whites, would tell her that they will not survive on Earth, which that's been confirmed to me by someone else that I trust dearly, that certain beings cannot survive here, especially some of their genetic experiments cannot survive here. They're not meant for this density. They're not meant for this project. And here, that was my mother's experiences on their craft and being a part of the program. And this would go on over and over. In this world, the world we live in, my mother, a lot of times when she would get in an emotional state or something like that, she would talk about missing her babies. My mother had a lot of bleeding physical problems her whole entire life. She had, woman bleeding about 3 weeks out of the month her whole entire life. When she was 25, her lung dropped, which is very strange. And I think a big part of it, human beings are not accustomed to being certain places. And that could definitely be some sort of side effect from them removing and taking in and out all these times over and over, and the things they were doing on her ovaries or embryos. I believe that was causing this constant bleeding. My mother had her tubes tied in hopes that it would stop this phenomena, stop the bleeding. It did not. And with my mother's tubes tied, she still miscarried 4 to 5 times. And when I was 16 years old, and this is another example of her missing her babies, this is one that, I experienced her with her. This isn't on a spacecraft somewheres, who knows. This is inside my house, and I heard my mother crying in the bathroom for about an hour and a half.
Wow.
I was worried. I was worried about her, and I snuck in there. Hey, Mom, are you okay? Make sure, she had clothes on. I went in there, and she's sitting next to the toilet, and she's just crying, and she miscarried something, and it wasn't a human being. It was unlike, I know like a small fetus looks really weird, but it was just something off. I didn't even know what I was looking at. It was just very off-putting, a very disturbing image for a 17-year-old boy to see. And just the mentality of like, that came out of my mother, and it looked like something out. It's wild. And then once again, she would miss her babies. All she wanted, all she ever did was beg these beings to have one for herself.
Wow, thank you, Robert. That's an incredible, what you just said. It just blows me away. Absolutely does, on so many levels too. God bless your mom. God bless her. Okay, we're gonna go. Oh, Sean, do you have a question? You want to unmute and just ask one question, please? Go ahead.
I do. I don't know. This is the first I've heard of your story, but I'm curious. Your aunt and your mom both witnessed the crash that night. Are they both living still, and do they still talk about it? How does this still live? In their lives on a public level, or is this something they just keep to themselves?
Thank you, Sean, for your question. Go ahead.
Perfect question. And I was actually going to get to this. So about a year and a half ago, I finally found the articles of my family's UFO crash story written by MUFON, 6 pages. Unfortunately, that was about a year and a half ago in June. 2 months prior, my mother passed away. One of the things my mother realized about these abductions is that by drinking alcohol and becoming drunk and putting poison in her bloodstream, that these beings would stop doing their experiments because they couldn't.
Wow.
A long life of doing that and not having people to talk to and share her experience without the ridicule, the laughter, and rejection that comes with it. And she didn't want the publicity of it at any means, and neither did my aunt. And she passed away about a year and a half ago, March 9th, 2020. And and unfortunately, 2 months after she passed, I finally found the evidence to validate her claims. And she wasn't there, so I kind of made it my mission to go out there and help other women and help other men out there that have been through an experience, because I don't want them to have to go through what my mother went through for sake of national security. Now, as far as the part of your question, how do people react? My aunt, for the first time, my grandmother that lives next door, when I first made my documentary, my aunt came over, that aunt that saw it first and called my mom. And right in front of my grandmother, she said the whole story. But at the time of the incident, she actually took her phone off the hook because Hollywood was calling. Investigators were talking to her. She's a very, very strong Christian woman. She goes to church every Sunday. She's a saint, one of the sweetest, soft-spoken people ever. She'll tell anyone what happened if someone asks her. I've really wanted to use her, but she's just, I don't want to do that to my aunt. She's too sweet. And I'm not going to have people ridicule her. She's been through enough. And if anyone wants to pick on someone about this story, that's why I'm here. But if someone like contacts her or talks to her face to face, she'll gladly tell people. But that was the first time my grandmother heard it come out of her mouth. And this also goes back to his thing. A lot of the other people that were involved, because the next day they just labeled it a mysterious helicopter crash, and everyone forgot about it. No one thought about it again. And, no one gave it a second thought. No one could put all the pieces together. The only people that could do that were the people that were in our house, talking to the men in black and all of this. But so many others. I remember when my mother and we used to sit around and talk about this, even though my grandmother went down there the next day and saw the marsh all tore up in a huge circle area there. She completely dismissed it, and she used to kind of laugh at my mom and I when we were talking about it. She knows it now, but I don't know, some people have a way of just burying stuff in the subconscious. The good thing is 30 years after, once I found these articles, before I only had my word, my mom had a VHS tape of her on the Philadelphia news, but that we lost it. We moved so many times. But, never having evidence, I promised myself and my mother that if someday evidence ever arose, I would scream it from the highest mountaintop, because I've been waiting my whole life. I've known these things are absolutely real my entire life. I just sit back and watch the news ridicule, mock abductees, contactees. But I've also been obtaining it, saving it, so I can throw it back in their face once I got old enough and wise enough to do so. And that's what I'm doing now. And my main goal is to help people like my mother, who, my mom, she shared it with a lot of her close friends, people I knew. And I did the same thing. And even I'm talking about, I'll know someone for 6 years. Then I would share this story with them, and they would act like they believe me. But sometimes you can see someone's face and, without having any sort of evidence, they would kind of give me that crazy look. But I'm like, you've known me for 6 years. When have I ever BS'd about anything? My character. Why would I, after 6 years, why would I just do something? It's because I wait that long because I really got to trust someone before. Now that I have the evidence, I'm running around screaming it like a madman. But before, no. I only shared it with people close to me because the thought of rejection to something that has really affected my family is unbearable,
Thank you, Sean, for your question. That was excellent.
Great question.
Thank you, Robert, for that answer. Robert, if it's okay, I see some hands up. So could we quickly do one more question round before we go on? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, then we'll start with Rena this time. Rena, one question, please, go right ahead. Just very, very, within a sentence or two, okay, for time-wise. Go ahead.
I'm an abductee, and I was wondering, I've had experiences with the triangle ships, and a race of beings that have tan-colored skin. They're about 4 feet high. They look like the Greys. But have you ever had experiences with, I call them the tans because they're tan-colored skin?
Yep. Go ahead.
And they're in triangle ships, kind of similar to what you described.
Okay, good question, Robert.
I know the species you're talking about. I haven't had contact with them. I actually could pull one up right now and show everyone on the live. But I know exactly what species you're called. Some kind of call them the orange sometimes. They have a really tanny orange skin. And their ships almost look like a boomerang, right? Like that kind of triangle.
No, the ones that I've seen, they look like what you were describing. Only along the long edges of the triangle, they curve up like a wing.
Oh, wow. I'm not familiar with those. The only other orange one. Yeah, not saying they don't
Yeah, that's,
exist.
that's what
I
the chip
haven't.
is like. But yeah, they have a tan orange skin. They're about 4 feet high, very tawny. They very, very strong. I was abducted by them one time, and a pillar of light appeared in my closet, and 4 of them came out. 2 grabbed my arms and 2 grabbed my legs, and they pulled me into the tube of light, and up we went into the ship and
Oh
zoomed
wow.
off. And,
Rena, thank you for your question. We're going to have to move, but wow, we got to figure, Rena, maybe at some point you could do it like a half an hour with that, because it sounds to me as though there's a lot of detail there. Thank you for your question, Robert. Thanks for answering it. Oh, wait,
Oh
Robert,
yeah.
what are you holding up here? There you go. It's kind of coming in and out.
Yeah,
with
because the
oh, there-
green screen.
Right. Go closer and we should be okay. Let's see that. Rena, can you see that?
no, because you're talking.
Okay. I'm trying to. It's kind of hard to see because the green screen.
Yeah, the green
But-
screen.
But there are
similar to that. Only
they're
they have
smaller
the
and
eyes like
orange.
the grays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Interesting.
similar to that.
All right. Well,
Very
thank you.
interesting.
Thank you very much. We're going to go now to AD. Please go ahead with your question. I see your hand is up there. Go ahead. One question, please.
Yeah, Robert, do you know if your mom is the only member included in this abduction program, or were there others, including yourself?
The only strange thing that was brought up when MUFON came out, when they were investigating my mother, they noticed this weird scar marking on her arm that apparently, Bud Hopkins and a few other people, Richard Butler, were involved, John Mack, all these kind of people. That was the crowd that was kind of involved with this case. So my mother brought up, and it turns out that her grandmother, my great grandmother, had the same markings in the same spot. So
That's interesting. That is interesting what you just said.
That's interesting. A little side thing. My mother's abductions, she drank a lot, but when she wasn't drunk, they were happening and going on essentially. And even sometimes if she had like even a buzz, they would still do these things. But that went on her whole life, even up till her later years. I've had a lot of stepdads, and my most recent stepdad and all the others, they have stories of waking up, lights in the room and like wild stuff like that. It doesn't matter who's around. I have experiences of seeing strange things. I don't like to talk about it publicly because it's just a really awkward moment from my childhood that I wish I could just absolutely forget it. But I've seen a few things. Now, as far as I've never been abducted to my knowledge, I've always been super clear about that. I've never been abducted, but I have had personal contact. I've seen these things directly 3 foot in front of me back in 2012. They helped me out. I guess it gave me a download. It was some sort of light being unlike anything I could possibly ever even try to describe. Ironically, as I said, for 30 years, I never had evidence of my family's crash case. We didn't know the exact date. It turns out that I saw this light being 21 years to the date, April 21st, 2012. Wow. Wild. Which I didn't put that together until a year and a half ago, because at the time of seeing this being, I started like writing down a bunch of crazy math problems and things like that. It just gave me all these downloads and I was going absolutely insane. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was actually a pastor at the time, a professional rock star, traveled all around. After I saw a ball of light, I ended up living in the Middle East, etc., etc. And I record UFOs all the time. I talk to tons of experiencers and contactees. So this is how I have really accumulated a lot of this information. But, I always look at it like this. My mom was, the one having the experimentation done, and then sometimes I like to think, I'm more of the experiment. So there's no reason to fuss with me. They leave me be, and they do, where my mom, they needed something. It's almost like the only thing they need from me is just to blend in and get along with everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're doing a little more than that, my friend, a lot more than that. Okay, now because we have only about a half an hour left, I'm going to ask Linda, you have a question, please, one sentence question, one sentence, because we're going to have to move this real fast now to go through what we need to go through the next half hour. So please understand that, everyone. Okay, Linda, go ahead.
Okay. This is more of a statement because I heard his mother's story, and it's a long story, but I have been abducted since child, and it's been going on and on and on. Now I'm older and it's still happening. I, at 43, was pregnant. I was pregnant for 3.5 months, and they took my child at that point. And the child comes to me in dreams. She's a grown woman of 27 years old, and I see her. So she comes to me. Now, another situation is I travel a lot at night. I do a lot of the time traveling, coming out of my body travel. Sometimes when I return, I'm noticing the last year and a half, because I've been to 7 doctors, and not because I want to know what doctors have to say. I'm just interested in wanting to know what their interpretation is of what I have. And 2 dermatologists and 5 MDs, nobody knows what I have. I have these gigantic, when I finish time travel and the next morning I get up, I pick up my nightgown and I see all these gigantic blotches all over my legs. Nobody knows what they are. They're with me for 5 weeks and then they leave. And
Linda,
then,
what is your question, Linda? We have to go. The time is going really quickly. What's your question, please?
all right, that's it. When he said something about his mother with the markings and things
Right,
like that,
right.
just something clicked in my mind,
Of course.
about
What
that.
I'd like to do though, Linda, what I'd like to do though, I know
Yeah.
how layered that story is. From what I
Yeah.
know of it, I'd like to have you as a speaker for maybe December or January, so we can really get into that. So just know that I totally get what you're doing, and I would want you to do a lot more of that. So just
It's
understand
just
that.
that I brought it up because he said that, and I have
Absolutely.
this presently right now.
No,
And a
it
brief
resonates. It resonates with you big time. I really
Oh, yeah, it
understand.
does.
My
And I
God.
resonated with his story, his mother
Yeah.
story.
and
Okay.
something with that too, my mother, some of these markings, it's from some of the strapping tools they use to hold you down on certain crafts. So it's very common, from scoop marks that look like little carved out things to red blotches and darts
Yeah.
almost in stripe patterns. Very, very common in
Yeah.
this phenomena. Absolutely.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Now, Sean, do you want one more question here before we go on? Do you have anything? You're going to have to unmute. There you
Yeah,
go.
no, I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does anybody not yet have one? I know, Mark, hang on a second. Anybody else not have a second question? You've all done the second. All right. All right. Now, Mark, go ahead, please. You're going to have to unmute. I see your little hand is up there.
Hey, how you
Actually,
doing?
it's a big hand. It's a big hand. All right. What is your question, Mark? Good to have you here, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Robert. We're wondering, did any information for the Earth come through, Robert, with your mom, or even you with your contacts in certain ways? For the
Good question.
planet Earth, what's going on now, and any
Absolutely.
Okay.
My mom, when she, not so much with the tall whites, the grays doing the experiments, but the other beings, the Arcturians and the Nordics, all those other beings, a lot of messages. One of them is, stop war, lay down nuclear energy, we're destroying the earth. Humanity needs to come together, put away their difference. These very vague, universal, like, get together ideas, you're destroying your earth. And more so than that, but like everything is connected, like that, like on a really deep level, like source energy. These beings, my light being that I saw a being of pure source energy. When you see something like that and it flashed, it sucked
Wow.
itself into itself, And when it did, I had a bad pain in my eye. And next thing I know, I was talking to my ancestors, people I didn't even know I was related to. I started having downloads, seeing things. I got it under control after a while, but at first it was a little overwhelming. And it was absolutely insane. And I haven't seen it since, and I beg for it every single day. But the messages that came in some of the visions I saw were absolutely awful, because I knew there was nothing I could do about it, to the point that I asked these beings, why would you even show me that to begin with? And it's taken a long time to understand how things work and how it goes. And, the greatest concern is for Terra, great mother Gaia. She's beautiful, and we got to take care of it. And, that's always been a very important, raise the frequency for this planet, raise the vibration, be the change you want to see, these kind of philosophies.
And Captain Valiant Thor had such a similar message also, and it goes on like that. And this is probably the best message they could possibly say to us. We need to wake up, right? Oh my God. All right, Robert Morningstar, I'm so glad that you are here, my friend. Do you have a question for Robert? Robert to Robert, come in. Robert, could you unmute and let us know if you have a question for Robert?
Well, actually, yes, I have a question about the scoop marks. Can you be a little more specific at the spot where it was in the shoulder?
It wasn't so much a scoop mark. I know the scoop marks. I've seen them a lot on people's legs, these little scoops. The thing on her arm was almost like a perfectly flat, perfectly healed scar. There was no raise on it. Just, she woke up one morning and she was getting out of bed. She noticed it, told my grandmother, and it was a completely flat. It looked like a scar, but when you have a fresh scar, it's raised. It wasn't raised. It was completely flat with the skin. It almost looked like laser, or something like that. It was very strange.
What you described to me reminds me of the scars that appeared on my brother's arm when he got a vaccination as a child. I got a vaccine, he got a vaccine, but he had a circular scar, flat, as you described.
Oh, that's very common. I lived in Turkey, and that's for tuberculosis. That's the old tuberculosis shot, and that's circular.
I think ours was probably a smallpox shot. But I'm saying that the similarity in the final form, she may have been receiving a vaccination from the aliens. The reason I asked about the scoop marks is I've studied them for decades and gathered many photographs. And after a couple of years of studying them, I found that the scoop marks are usually placed or appear at areas of the body where the arteries or the veins come closest to the surface, where it is most easily, it's easiest to tap or take blood.
Absolutely.
For example, scoop marks in the palms. We have a palmar artery over here that feeds the blood to the fingers. Scoop marks on the legs. This is the femoral artery. The famous body that was found in Brazil in the jungle, mutilated body, had a hole in the upper arm, had a hole in the lower back, had a hole in the center, and had a hole in the thigh. And that corresponded to the femoral artery, the brachial artery in the arm, and the inferior vena cava, which is what returns white blood or lymph back up to the upper body after it's been circulating. And that's why I asked about the location. Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Excellent question. Robert Morningstar, we want to have you, my friend, as not only on the podcast, but also doing one of our Zoom meetings. We'd love to have you at the beginning of the new year. So you'll be getting invitations, my friend. You'll be getting those real soon.
By the way, can I give you a heads up? Tonight, the Leonid meteor showers are still on. Last night was the peak. I went out, I saw a couple of flashes and clouds, and I had my camera, but the battery died. So I'm going out again tonight, and it's going to be in the southwest. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. is when I'm going to be out at the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. And you have to find the star Regulus, which is the brightest star in the constellation Leo, which is why they're called the Leonid. And so there's going to be a full moon in the west, and the weather in New York tonight is going to be beautiful. Clear.
Oh, thank
It's
you
clear
for
last
that.
night. It's going to be clear tonight, and the temperature is going to be 54 with a wind of 4 miles an hour. It's going to be very pleasant. So Mark Brinkerhoff, he's a neighbor, just letting you know as well. So if anybody wants to take a peek, I've gotten the feeling that NASA doesn't want us to look at them. They're telling people, "Oh, you're not going to see anything." And space.com put out instructions yesterday as to where to see it, and they were pointing people in the wrong direction. They said, "Look to the east." Just before I left,
Robert, what a surprise. What a surprise that they would do that, that they would mislead us. Isn't that, I mean, who could have known that? Who could have possibly predicted that?
Tim Cook, the top meteor scientist at NASA, I'm reading the article. He says to me, it sounds like they're trying to dissuade people from going out at all. And they're telling them to look in the wrong direction. They said east. But before I left, I said, let me check Stellarium and see where it really is. So I type in Regulus, and it was in the southwest. So southwest, off there toward the south and toward New Jersey.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Good luck.
Wow.
And nice meeting you, Robert.
Hal,
Yes,
I see
thank
you there. Hal, do you have a question right now for Robert? Hal? You're going to have to unmute yourself. Yeah, I see that you're muted right now. Just unmute real quick. Time is flying here.
Okay, one quick question. Was it hard or was it not a problem justifying with being a pastor and the UFO work you do?
Oh, interesting question.
Wonderful question. Well,
that is good for you, Hal. Good for you.
Ironically, my mom told me to stay away from churches. You know, my mother, you know, a lot of these beings, they've kind of evolved past religions and things like that. So I was brought up to stay away. Also, when my mother was pregnant with me, they kicked her out of the church because she was a single mom, 18 years old, pregnant with me. So I was raised to avoid churches at all costs. But 17 years old, I was going through a lot, start going to church. I ended up going to Bible college. I became a pastor, all of this. And, at first when I was, having the scriptures given to me and stuff like that, and hearing these incredible stories, they didn't sound that far-fetched to me. They sounded like encounters with strange things that they don't understand. And honestly, it was almost a little relatable to me. It wasn't that hard to believe some of the things in there, and not just Christianity. I also lived in the Middle East and studied Islam. I've been into a mosque. I lived with Muslim people. I've done Ramadan. I've studied Judaism and other ancient cultures. I believe everything holds a little bit of the truth. And if you focus on the positive of things, you can get a lot out of it. But one thing for sure, I did not talk about my UFO experience, why I was a pastor in the church. I knew better with real close friends, but that wasn't something. I kept it to myself because I can understand how closed-minded some people can be. Although you have people like Ezekiel that literally saw a flying saucer come out of the ground and aliens come out. I mean, and it's mind-blowing. Moses had a UFO pick him up and take him around the earth to show him it was round. It's wild.
It really is. Hal, thank you for that really good question. Michael, do you have any question before we move on? Michael? Mike, are you there? No? Okay. All right. So we've done that. So Robert, if you will, we have about maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'd like to have you continue uninterrupted right now and just give us a little bit more of what you were sharing before we did the questions, if you will.
So absolutely, this was a big experience. Going back to the three questions, after the gentleman in the Air Force did this regression therapy, which the Air Force uses regression therapy on post-traumatic stress disorder, soldiers that are in combat situations, they need intel. So that's in the first place why this guy was trained for that. And after that experience, it was a lot going on. We just saw this thing crash. My mom relives her experiences for the first time. It was very brief, but her encounter, the room filling up with light, and like her being like dematerialized, I guess, if you want to call it that, and coming to on this, metal table, if it was metal, I don't know what it was made out of. And being in this room and having these experiences, it was a lot. And at later times, there was other regression. MUFON came out 2 other times and did regression therapy. And some of the stuff, I mean, we were country. My mom had a high school diploma. None of us were geniuses. The stuff my mother was saying about genetics, DNA, and some of the things that were coming out, it was just like you would never expect it to come out of someone like her's mouth. And this is then the regression. The show Sightings or Unsolved Mysteries came out. They recorded. Guess what? It never aired. It never aired. But they were going to block out my mom's face because my mom wanted to remain anonymous. Then eventually, due to some of the publicity that was coming to my mom, she cut ties from the Mutual UFO Network. She cut ties to anyone because, she was realizing, once the public finds out about this, and I was starting to get older at that time, I was starting to go to school and things like that. And she knew how cruel kids could be. And to grow up, if she would have went full out public, and if they did air these things, and, I would have, people, aliens rape your mom and all these, ridiculous things. You know how people are. So, and my mom understood that, and she didn't want me to grow up and be the guy who has a crazy alien mom. You know what I mean? So, she really always tried to protect me with everything she did up to her last days here on this planet, and she it was a lot to process, especially I was just about 4 years old. It was a lot. I was just at that age where you start to understand reality. Then you turn on the TV and you're seeing aliens and stuff, and people say that's fake, and then you ask yourself, well, what's going on over here? Like, this is what I saw, this is what happened. My family was told, to be brief, very important part of the story, the 3 questions my mother asked the Men in Black. And these questions were asked before they threatened to take me away and telling her, say, the next day you're going to say it was a helicopter. My mother asked the Men in Black these 3 important questions. And these are questions that only a loving mother would ask, trying to protect her child. First question, are these things dangerous? The Men in Black replied, if they were dangerous, do you think we would still be here? The second question my mother asked the Men in Black, why don't people know about these things? The Men in Black said, we are doing everything we can by preconditioning. Within the next 10 years, you will see signs of extraterrestrials in movies, medias, and all sorts of, media. And all their answers were very straight to the point. The third question my mother had, and this is probably the most important up to this point of them being there, they never admitted to extraterrestrials. They never said anything other than my mom and her 2 friends saying, can you draw 3 different kinds of extraterrestrials? They didn't admit or say anything. And my mother said, when these beings are taking me and I'm not here, what would happen if something happened to my elderly grandfather that was living there that she took care of at the time, and my baby, me? And the Men in Black said they use small grays that stay behind. And if anything was to happen to you or your baby or your grandfather, they would have you back, and they snap their fingers like that, and real weird snap. They did a couple weird things. Those draconian cyborgs get a little wonky every now and then. I honestly think there's some sort of humanoid cyborg thing put together in order to keep certain affairs, under hush. They're not normal. I understand that military and certain, CIA, FBI, they do weird stuff on purpose to get in your head. But these cats, they looked human. But something was off with them. Like when they were holding the pencil, when they had the notepad, they were looking at the pencil and holding it like they had no idea what it was. When they snapped their finger, they were so arrogant about it, like they just learned a new trick or something like that. They're
Wow.
they're weird. They're weird. And so, with that threat, for the namesake of national security, they threatened a 22-year-old single mother to take me away. Well, now my mom's gone. I'm here. I'm a grown man. Bring it on. I'm not going to be silent. And my mission, my intent, because everyone has a narrative in the UFO community, and I want to make mine crystal clear. My intent is revenge. Revenge for every person that was ridiculed, mocked to the point of being hospitalized simply because they had an experience they didn't understand. It's ridiculous. And all this cover up for the sake of national security and greed so they can benefit their own space program and leave all of us in the dark while we get technology that is thousands of years old. Thousands of years old. What they got, they are thousands of years ahead, not just 20 years ahead. They are thousands of years ahead. And I am out for revenge to clear and set the record straight that these things exist, and people should be able to talk about their realities and their experiences without being judged. Because I believe if we do this and we all come together and we all share our experiences, we will find others that have had those experiences. And that's where the magic happens. We are not waiting for disclosure. We are the disclosure.
We are the disclosure. Robert, what you're saying is so right on. Whoa, man. Yeah, let's give him a hand, God. Let's give him a hand. Robert, you are such an amazing guy. What a dude you are, man. You've got, on so many levels, you are right on target on all of this. What you just said, oh my God, I wish I had a copy. I will. If you could write it down, I'll put it on our website, because you are saying exactly what needs to be done. I think everybody in our Disclosure Network group, and we're getting there, we're getting a pretty big group now worldwide, they will absolutely back every word that you just said. It's absolutely what needs to be done now. And your energy and your passion on this are just wonderful. You really encourage, you enlighten, and you make things better by just being yourself and giving us your real view of what's important, and what you said is important. It's like the future. That's what you're talking about. I just can't tell you how impressed I think all of us, I can speak for everybody here, is for your focus, your incredible focus. And the bottom line is you are after the truth, always. That permeates every single thing you said about yourself, your mom, your family, and what happened to you. An extraordinary experience. And you were after, tell it like it is, put it on the table so we can see it clearly, crystal clearly. I just salute you. Absolutely. I want to, with the last 10 minutes, Robert, I would like, if you will, just give us maybe a little bit more about what you see for yourself and for the ufologist community in the future. What would you like to see? Give us some idea about that. I'd like to end this program that way.
Well, eventually there's not going to be a need for us anymore talking about these things when they're just here hanging out with us and we can go directly to the source. So that's my end goal right there. But my real end goal is, what we've had to go through. I just want to see my brothers and sisters. Those beings, these, my mom's children, they're the only family I have left. I'm an only child. I'm the last one of my bloodline in my family, and I'm going to be the last one. That's all I have left of my mom. And it's a shame for, national security, measures, that certain things will never come out, and that's what happened with our family and everything happening. I really urge the UFO community to stop relying on Washington, D.C. to do things. They will never give a true disclosure, because if they did, guess what? we would not have a government anymore. And this is coming from someone whose ancestors built this country. All right. I'm related to every US president there is. If people only knew the truth, we would have no more government. This is why we will never have full disclosure. And as long as we're waiting on that, instead of just coming out, sharing our experiences, talking about our friends' experiences, and putting every little tiny piece together, that's where the magic happens. And for me, what I'm trying to do is a big part of what I do in disclosure community, I find the things that are old, forgotten, beat up, tossed out on the side of the road. I take it, I add some fancy graphics, I make it all social so people under the age of, 30 can understand it, which a lot of times that means I have to dumb my stuff down and act stupid and be really silly just to get a, bigger point across on TikTok. That's what I do. And sometimes I got to humble myself in order to get the message actually out there. It's a part of my technique. But, this is what I'm doing. I'm taking the things that were overlooked, ridiculed, laughed at, and I'm presenting it and backing it and trying to bring it to life and help others get their experience out and connect to other people. And, in hopes that they can find someone that had their experience. My main goal is no one should have to go through what my mother went through. And unfortunately, the worst part about that UFO crash wasn't the crash, wasn't finding out extraterrestrials were abducting my mother and creating children with her and all this kind of things. The worst part about all of that were the men in black and the Air Force official. They're complete garbage. They are the most terrifying things in the universe. Humans are some of the few extraterrestrials that don't realize they're extraterrestrials, which makes them extremely violent because when they don't understand something, they hate it, they lash out, and they attack it every single time. We are the most dangerous extraterrestrials in the universe. And if we're not careful, we're going to blow ourselves apart.
Boy, that's the truth, Robert. Just thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. You are an amazing guy. More power to you. Keep us close. You're going to be on my podcast, I hope, many times in the next year, and also on our more Zoom meetings, because there's other sections of what your life is saying about other episodes that we really want to get into. Also, I want to thank everybody here. You guys are heroes to me. Robert Morningstar, you are my God, you are way up there, my friend. And Mark Brickerhoff, you are an amazing, amazing guy. Rena, you're writing about what's going on in your life and your amazing science fiction writing. It's going to catch. I know you've got a film. There's a possibility now. We wish you every best wish to get that project going. Keep us close on that. Linda, you are amazing. Also, you are a psychic. You understand what's going on, and you've helped me so much in my own personal search for the truth. I cannot thank you, Linda, enough. Sean, again, a welcome to you, my new friend, our new friend, and we hope you're going to enjoy this Disclosure Network New York. Adrian, you are the best. You are an amazing researcher. You've done so much already. Thank you so much too. Hal, you know how I feel about you. You are amazing. Jim, you've been there for us technically as well as issues. I cannot thank you enough, Jim, for all that you're doing for us. And last but certainly not least, Michael, I know you're out there. I can see your phone graphic. Just thank you also. I know you've got some projects going on that are incredibly exciting. Keep us very close on that. So here we go. This is Nick Curto for Disclosure Network New York. Our website is www.dnny.info. And please take a look at that. And if you'd like to join as a member of Disclosure Network, I'm going to give you my email address. So please get a pencil and a piece of paper. My email address is NICKNYNY1, and that's the numeral 1, not ONE, but the numeral 1 at gmail.com. One more time, NICKNYNY1 at gmail.com. Okay, everybody, thanks so much for attending the meeting. And for those people on YouTube, please remember us and tune in for more of our programs as they come about. Love you guys. Much love to you all. Be kind to one another. Take good care, guys. Good night.